Today is not about personal testimonies or an opportunity for attendees to tell their personal stories, but we thought it would be a very strange event if we didn't invite our next speaker to address you on speaking up. Grace Dyas is a theatre maker and activist, and since arriving in the professional theatre scene straight from Dublin Youth Theatre, she and her colleagues in Theatre Club have created a bold and ambitious body of work. Please welcome Grace to the stage.
Thank you very much. So I'm here because in October of last year, I wrote a blog describing an experience I had with Michael Colgan, former director of the Gate Theatre. Today, I'm going to share with you what I've learned from the past few months in the hopes that it will be useful to you as you consider the questions of today. I want to presence that the territory we're exploring here brings up a lot of fear in me. I know a lot of people feel that way too. I want to acknowledge the courage it took everyone in this room to come here, to start to face into this. I know that for some of you, being here will bring up painful memories of past hurts or of present challenging situations. I'm trying to stay with my fear, not to fight it, push it aside, or deny it. I believe that in the fear, we will each find the wisdom we all need. When I wrote my blog post, it felt like I'd thrown a grenade. People started to write to me and tell me their own experiences of abuse of power, sexual harassment, and bullying. 311 people have written to me so far. Their experiences are in media, politics, law, and the overwhelming majority are in theatre. I've discovered a lot about myself in the past few months. I've learned that when I feel fear, I try to control. At the height of all this, I wanted to know how to manage it all. I wanted to be able to fix it. I thought I could see a 5-act structure for how it all works out. A way to bring all the characters in this story to a safe resolution. I learned that it would not be that simple. The more experiences I heard, the more I started to understand the complexity. I had to accept that I can't resolve this situation alone. No matter how afraid I am, I can't control it. I had to meet my own powerlessness. As theatre artists, we understand the complexity of human interactions. Our role is to explore relationships, to reflect society back to itself, and to ask questions in order to elevate consciousness, so we know well how complicated human beings are. Faced with the task of establishing a code of behaviour, we know that it's impossible to legislate for every scenario that could possibly come up when a group of people are making work together. For me, this brings up more fear. Fear that there'll be too much safety, that we could get to a place where we're so afraid of repeating the mistakes of the past that there's no artistic freedom. But the flip side of that is, as theatre artists, with our study of humanity, we are well equipped to innovate and find a way to create enough safety that allows artistic risk to flourish. In our work, we stray away from black and white. We know how to hold opposing truths. The truth is, we are not gathered here in this room because of behaviour that is subtle or unclear. We are here because of behaviour that has been widely known and acknowledged as damaging to the dignity of others, but yet has been tolerated and enabled for decades. So many of the people who wrote to me talked about having nowhere to go. Conversations happened, but there was no action. And we filled the void created by the absence of structure with gossip, open secrets, inertia, and inaction. I was told that I was brave hundreds of times for writing my blog. I don't think that writing my blog was brave. I believe it was courageous. Bravery is doing something without feeling any fear. Believe me, I was afraid. Courage is a state of mind which enables you to feel the fear and take the action. Courage comes from the heart. People have said to me, I could never do what you did. And I hope that nobody else has to. 13 of us spoke publicly about our experiences because we hoped it would make a difference. It was a sacrifice. I hope that today in this room, our sacrifice can lead to a culture where nobody needs to be so exposed to affect change, where there is always somewhere to go. For those 311 people who wrote to me, I was the place to go. They've each spoken up in their own way. Some addressed the people who had hurt them directly, some told another colleague, some went to boards, some made formal complaints, some went to the guards. They didn't take this action straight away. It came from conversation and careful consideration. The behaviour that the 13 of us experienced was overt, but it gave a context to many to explore more subtle behaviour that they had experienced. They struggled to name it. They questioned, was that offensive? Was that abusive? Am I just being too sensitive? I couldn't answer those questions for them. I told them that they were the arbiter of what feels right for them. If you feel bullied, it doesn't mean the person intends to bully you, but your feelings are no less real and no less true. Here's where we need to hold those opposing truths. This is all subjective. We all need to have the right to bear witness to our own experience. Accepting that subjectivity throws up more fear. When I quoted Christine Buckley in my blog and said, I believe you before you open your mouth, this brought up more fear. Do we just believe every accusation? In the absence of a structure, there will always be that fear. My question for today is, how can we create structures that can hold these behaviours to rigorous account while having compassion for both the accusers and the accused within those structures? How could we build an open, receptive structure where the accused and the accuser can trust that they will both be believed, where we all feel safe enough to start to name these behaviours? Can we condemn the behaviour without condemning the person? When I think of these experiences I have heard, it feels instinctive for me to go to black and white, thoughts of crime and punishment. I try to have compassion and empathy. Bullying and harassment are coping mechanisms. Bullying is not an identity, it's a behaviour. But when it's allowed to continue with no structure to address it, it is too damaging to be tolerated in any way. As artists, we often work under time pressure. We feel like we need to get it done. We put the work above our own needs. We welcome vulnerability in the work, but sometimes we can't hold it in real life. There have been many times where I've felt like I don't have time to speak up. I'd rather get on with it than call it out. I've learned that taking this action to speak up does not take away from the work. It is the work. Many of the people who wrote to me had experiences that had happened a number of years ago. They were no longer working with the person or the people involved. I encouraged them to get in touch and try to clear it. In some cases, other people might still be experiencing that behaviour today. By having this difficult conversation, you're helping yourself and you're helping others, but you shouldn't have to do that alone. There has to be a structure that can support you. I hope the code being initiated here today will become a structure that can support and empower us all. I hope that structure will give us all the space to speak up and call it out in our own way, in our own time, with courage and compassion, putting our own self-care at the centre of the action. I believe that these behaviours are part of our humanity. We can't stop them from happening, but we can develop healthier ways to address them. I think the first step is becoming comfortable talking about them openly. I have learned that having the conversation is always better than letting something go unsaid. Every time I've tolerated a behaviour that doesn't sit well with me, it has been damaging. When I've found the courage to speak up and call it out, it has been healing. And equally, every time someone has come to me and expressed that my behaviour had hurt them, it was painful at the time, but I needed to hear it. And I'm grateful to the people who have had the courage to have that conversation with me. As theatre artists, we are required to provide a risk assessment for the production if actors or crew are working from a height or destroying the set with a chainsaw, or even if someone has to stand on a chair. There is an inherent psychological risk in making art with a group of people. What would a psychological risk assessment look like for the idea of a group of people going into a room together to try and make the impossible happen over and over again, with not enough money, not enough time, working with their own histories, working with the collective unconscious, the shadow, trauma, completely venturing into the unknown in an emergent creative process with potentially no idea of what might happen. In every risk assessment, we state that all we can do is mitigate the risks. We can't control them entirely, no matter how afraid we are. If I stand on a chair, I still might fall. I had to learn this. I invite you to accept that no code, no toolkit will make you 100% safe. But we can take responsibility for ourselves. We all have power and the ability to use it or abuse it. I think none of this will matter unless we can each look at ourselves and our behaviour around power. When we speak up, we become empowered. When we stay silent, we give it away. Informed by this experience to take responsibility for myself, I've written my own code of behaviour. It's completely unique to me. I am responsible for my own self-care. I place my self-care at the centre of my work. It's not ethical to hurt myself in order to help other people. I try not to create the conditions that I'm trying to redress. I welcome all expression. I acknowledge that I have the capacity to harm others, and when I'm wrong, I admit it as promptly as I can. I take action where I can with courage. I believe that there is wisdom in conflict. If I feel hurt, I try to name it. I believe you before you open your mouth. When I was writing my blog, I was asked what outcome I wanted. I think this is an important question to consider before taking any action. There are two stories here, outlining different ideas for the future of Irish theatre. In the first story, there are bad people and good people, and the bad people need to be stopped. We are outraged. In this story, we want punishment and sanctions for these horrendous people who've hurt us. We blame our artistic sensibilities. We emulate business people in the private sector. If we make new rules, decide the punishment, everything will be okay and we'll all feel safe. This is our perspective in this story. There's only one. It's black and white. And that's the important part of that story. It gives us a way of feeling safe. That's why we need it. Because when we feel fear, we try to control. In the second story, we acknowledge that we don't just feature in our own story. We are all the protagonists and the agonists in the multitude of stories we appear in. We have courage to look at our past mistakes and the wrongs that we feel were done to us. We acknowledge that just like anyone driving a car has the potential to cause harm and the responsibility to do everything they can to avoid that, we as human beings attempting to make art together have that capacity and that responsibility. In the second story, our narrative can hold multiple perspectives. The outcome we want is restorative, not punitive. Our approach reflects and honours our artistic selves. We innovate. We create a new structure that can hold opposing truths. And we expose the truth. We see that this is about power. We redress our past failures. We heal collectively from this hurt. It won't go in a straight line. It won't be done in a day. We'll move backwards and forwards. We'll make mistakes again. But there will be movement, action, change, flow. It's difficult to hold opposing truths. It's hard to stay with the fear. Courage is learnt. It doesn't happen overnight. This is a process, and we will make mistakes. Ella Clark wrote about the loss to the art form from these years of inaction. The people who gave up because they found it too hard. That is what's at stake here. That's what we lose if we don't evolve. There are two stories in the room, with two different ideas of the future of Irish theatre. What future do you want? In the last few months, I met my own powerlessness. I learned that no one should have to do this alone. We all have to hold the power in order for this to change. But standing here, I feel like I don't have to do this alone anymore, because we've already started to build the place to go. Look around you. You're here.
Thank you so much, Grace, for sharing all of that with us and setting the tone of optimism for the day. We appreciate that enormously. Our next speaker is somebody a lot of you will know. She is Andrea Irvine. And Andrea is an actor who has worked extensively in the Irish theatre, film and television, as well as radio for the last 27 years. She's currently a member of the executive of Irish Actors Union Equity, and together with her colleague actor Fiona Bell, who cannot be here today because she is working, she wrote a letter of support and solidarity with the women who spoke out publicly about their experiences of sexual harassment and bullying in the theatre sector. This letter was co-signed by 70 women working in the sector and was published in the Irish Times in January 2018. And we've had a number of meetings with Andrea and some of her colleagues in the course of the last couple of months, and we're really delighted that she is going to speak to us today. So, Andrea, can I invite you to come and join us, please?
And your colleagues.
No, they're staying. They're staying. They're going to chat to them.
Hello, how are you? Revelations about abuses of power by high-profile individuals working in the arts, culture and entertainment sectors internationally have triggered a watershed moment in relation to workplace sexual harassment. Many women and some men have broken the silence around sexual assault and harassment on the human megaphone of social media with tweets, posts, blogs and shares. Stories are hitting the front pages of print media and the news and the news headlines on the airwaves. The house lights have come up, and what has been revealed is how common sexual harassment is, how damaging it can be to those on the receiving end of it, and how the power dynamic in the workplace can hide these abuses in plain sight. When Grace Dyas posted her blog on Tumblr in October 2017, describing her experience of sexual harassment with a very powerful individual in our sector, she courageously and mindfully brought the conversation home to roost here in Ireland. Without this, and the women who spoke up subsequently, we wouldn't be here today. We owe them a great debt. Without this, the letter that my colleague Fiona Bell and I wrote, and which was co-signed by 70 other women across the sector, was in support and solidarity with these women, and also to bear witness that sexual harassment happens in our sector, because we all, 72 of us, to one degree or another, have experienced it. So what is it? And why are we talking about it now when most women will tell you it is part of the fabric of daily life from puberty onwards? We know that it is less about sexual desire and more about power and control. Control over our bodies, the way we dress, the choices we make. We meet it in all walks of life, walking down the street, in the classroom, on public transport, on our university campuses, and eventually in our workplaces. Describing the recent deluge of stories as revelations, in fact, seems problematic because, as this word implies, it seems problematic as this word implies something previously unknown, and we all know. The problem is that it has, in fact, been accepted as a given, a fact, an inevitability, an occupational hazard, something to be put up with and got on with. It has become normalised and entrenched in our workplaces and in broader society. Fearing that saying anything will make matters worse, those who suffer it push it aside and minimise its effects at great personal and professional cost to themselves. Women are now doing their own accounting, attempting to classify moments from our past to gauge how they fit into this larger picture. But we're not stupid. We know there is a wide-ranging spectrum, from crude remarks to persistent innuendo, to unwanted touching, to assault and sexual violence. The milder end of this spectrum is often portrayed as murky or ambiguous based on the grounds that it is hard to tell the difference between a bit of banter and a humiliating remark. So we asked the 72 signatories of our letter to give us some examples of the things that have been said and done to them in their workplace. And we just wanted to give you a taste of this and let you judge for yourselves. So Eleanor Methven and Ali White.
Role models for young women, did any of you ever think that young men need role models too? Why can't you try being a role model to a young man? Virtue nods his head emphatically to show, yeah, he's supposed to be there already.
With a big smile on his face, Sharabine, ugliest theatre company in Ireland.
Said by an employer to an actress he knew was in a relationship with a woman, have you slept with them? Inferring there's a chance.
The fact that telling a man no on a night out will only be taken seriously when in conjunction with I have a boyfriend.
One day a male co-worker asked me to speak with him privately. He asked me directly why I had a problem with him and what he ever did to me to make me so rude to him. Once I told him he was being paranoid, he ended the conversation by saying, I guess it's just your resting bitch face that made me do that.
I worked with a team of all men in a collaborative group effort. Later, the director told me he expected me to keep them in line because I was the mother figure of the group. Eventually, I found out that their salaries were higher than mine, even though I was expected to bear the brunt of responsibilities.
I had recently had a disagreement with a co-worker that required me to put my foot down in response to his actions. He asked me into a meeting room to talk it out. He was waiting in the doorway. He literally blocked me from entering the room and wouldn't let me in without hugging him first because he thought I needed a hug to make me feel better about the situation.
I was hired to work as a bartender at a golf course restaurant. And during the interview, the hiring manager gave me a tour of the facilities. He told me later that it was really a way to parade prospective hires in front of the male kitchen managerial staff, and that they all gave the thumbs up or the thumbs down behind my back in terms of attractiveness.
On the phone with an ex, inquiring about the lack of work. You're just in the wrong word, he said. One, if you just wait a few years, you can be like, and named a hugely experienced older actress in Ireland, and you can get cast as old crones.
With a co-worker playing my husband, we were waiting to do a scene with the young actor playing our son. Don't call your mother a bitch, son. I'm the only one allowed to call her a bitch. Isn't that right, bitch?
In conversation with a male co-worker discussing why there weren't more plays by women being produced. I think the reason is because the need to create is satisfied in women by giving birth.
While trying to facilitate a quick change off stage by taking some clothes off while still on stage, I ended up in just my bra, being undressed and nothing to do with the scene. The male designer shouted out, ooh, that's sexy. Again, sexiness having nothing to do with the scene. When I expressed my discomfort, the male director then shouted up, sure, you're an attractive woman, I'm not.
A film director, now in his 80s, said to me when I was only acting a few years, you're too intelligent to ever be a really good actress.
A director looking at a possible costume. That costume's not doing anything for me. I can't see your legs or your tits.
And an older male actor to me while we were running lines in his dressing room, don't worry, you're safe. You're much too old for me. I was 33.
So in isolation, thank you very much. In isolation, many may not seem so bad. They are absurd, ridiculous, crass. But the effect of multiple comments and multiple incidents, all the small moments of feeling diminished simply because we are female, chips away at our sense of self, our place in the world, limiting the possibilities of what we can become. The trauma of smaller trespasses reminds us cruelly and starkly that these are the terms on which we are valued. It means we can be grabbed, groped, degraded, dismissed without consequence. Part of the rage is about decades and centuries we spent being pressured to underreact. Our objections to the small stuff bantered away, ignored or attributed to our own inability to cut it in the real world. Nor does the harm end with the original offence. It is how we are evaluated based on our reactions to it. Do we smile? Do we remain stone-faced, reciprocate or retreat, ignore or complain? What becomes of us can hang on what we choose. For female performers, too often our intrinsic worth is identified as erotic, ornamental and decorative. The ranking of women purely by looks is a symptom of an industry culture which excludes and alienates women. The skills, talent, insights, authority, discernment, passion, creativity and sheer hard work we also bring is undermined, sometimes seen as not even relevant. We are dehumanized, reduced to sexual objects, and stripped of our professional credibility. And yes, there is a sexual element, or there can be a sexual element in our work, sometimes subtle and sometimes not. But this is never an excuse for blurring the lines between the actor and the fictional character, whether in auditions, on sets, on stages, or in rehearsal rooms. It is also these perspectives of women that can encourage predation, discrimination and abuse. It is the inevitable consequence of how we're often portrayed to the world. It can be a wrecking ball to self-esteem and the ability to produce good work. And on top of all that, we are freelancers. We have no job security and no HR. Low wages are not uncommon. Most actors, contrary to popular opinion, are not famous, are not rich, and are not glamorous. We just want to work for our living, and we work hard. We work in a variety of roles. We are day players, character actors, fringe theatre performance, independent film actors, voiceover artists, corporate role players. We're often lucky to make ends meet. We know the importance of working relationships in our sector, and this can prevent us from speaking out about abuses. Being seen as a troublemaker may limit our future work opportunities. This highly competitive trade can easily move on from someone who has been labelled difficult, and as simply as that, we lose our means and our dreams. Despite the conversation that has exploded over the last 5 months, it has also left many women feeling silenced, and there are many reasons for this. Telling the world you have been abused means having to relive the violation and the stress and humiliation that comes with it. It means mustering up the faith that your words will be met with compassion, even though history has shown us time and again that victims are often blamed and not believed. And this is not to advocate believing women as a blanket practice, but to listen to them and to trust them, which is different. Many have not spoken up because they fear they'd suffer professional reprisals and reputational harm. The risk of retaliation feels very real. We can find ourselves conspicuously and indefinitely out of work. Rewards for speaking up are scant or non-existent. We want careers, not legal cases. We want paychecks, not apologies. And so we are caught in a vicious cycle. If nobody talks, it goes unchecked. Gossip becomes our lingua franca. We get by with whispering networks and open secrets. However, women who do speak out may pay the price, and often do. Silence begets injustice, but so sometimes does speaking up. And the dark, beating heart at the centre of all this, gender inequality. Sexual harassment mainly, but not exclusively, is suffered by women. Its broader context, the continuing gender inequality in society at large. And this is not simply a story of individual misconduct, but of systemic inequity. This is really about work and women's equality in the workplace. Having this conversation as if it is about sex and not equality involves its own trauma and pain. However, we must not let that focus permit us to look away from broader horrors, whole systems of disempowerment and economic professional vulnerability. Whether by speaking out, by posting, tweeting, blogging, or signing an open letter, we are creating visibility and awareness. But now we need to insist on transformation. We need to stop talking about sexual harassment and discrimination like it's the most normal thing in the world. We need real change to the material lives, to the material conditions of our working lives. And it is now the job of the companies, organisations, institutions and government to take responsibility for this. At best, they have been asleep at the wheel on these issues, and at worst, they have colluded in the silence and the shame that surrounds us. They have failed to protect us in our workplaces. We want no more open secrets. We want openness. We want transparency. We want accountability. We urge you to heed our call. Thank you.